Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we typically talk about firefighter and paramedic line of duty deaths to learn from tragic events and potentially prevent them from happening in the future. Today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Doug and Dirk. Hey Dirk, how's it going? What's new? What you been doing?
Everything's good. I suffer from a little sinus infection. Not infection, just sinus problems. I'm not sure if it's allergies in my old age, getting allergies. Never had a problem with that, but yeah, just runny nose. But got one night shift left, and then I'm going on vacation for a couple of weeks. Not doing anything, just hanging out with the wife during spring break. While
she's off too.
Yeah, she's off too, and we're empty nesters right now. Our son is in Spain for an exchange, so practicing for the empty nester.
Right on. Save your money so you can send it away to the kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, watch anything lately? Reading any books? Playing any sports or games? Or
No, not with my sinuses. I don't even work out right now. Did I read anything? No, I don't think I read anything. I just listen to podcasts, weekly scraps, and stuff like that. Actually, I mean, if you count audiobooks, I did read Five Alarm Leadership by Lasky and Salka. So that was really refreshing and was awesome. And then we went to a conference, went up north to our friends in Grand Prairie County, and participated in also a leadership conference presented by Jason Hovelman, chief from the States.
okay, I've heard of him.
He wrote a couple of books and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So it was really good. And guess who went with me? Dougie.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. How are you doing, Dougie?
Nice segue, Dirk. You're learning here, hey?
Wow, what a pro!
Hey, but before we really get into it, I think we should mention the EPS officers that got killed there last week. And I mean, it was 2 constables responding to a domestic, got shot and killed, and it's our neck of the woods here in Alberta. So Constable Travis Jordan and Constable Brett Ryan, both in their 30s. Just shout out to them, I guess, and their families. That's not an easy thing to deal with, and all of the police in the area. I'm sure it's not fun to deal with. Thankfully, none of us have really dealt with a line of duty death in the fire service in our neck of the woods, but I know for me, this is the second time in my area there was a line of duty death for police, and there was one in Calgary last year. So just wanted to say that before we really got into things. But yeah, I went with Dirk up to Grand Prairie for the course. It was pretty good. It was 10 hours of driving, talking in the car, which was good, and there and back, obviously. And then, the course for the day, all about leadership, and it wasn't as fire service geared as I thought it would be or was expecting. It was more just leaders. I mean, you could have changed a few pictures in the slideshow to a sports team, and it could have been about leadership and coaching, whatever. But it was good. It was some good reminders and some new perspective on things, and I'm glad I went, and always good to network with other people. My first time up with Grand Prairie County. Dirk knew them already, but my first time up there with them.
Right. Well, leadership is leadership and teamwork, and there's a lot of parallels, whether it's a corporation, a sports team, or a public service like the fire service or police or EMS. Exactly. Yeah. Good.
One of your pet peeves there, Paul. I sent you the picture there. A little town of like 1,000 people with a nice custom cab, $750,000 engine, sitting outside in the snow.
Yep, exactly. Just crazy. We'll get into that.
Yeah, at least it was an E1 for you.
There you go. This is going to be a Tailboard Talk episode, and Doug titled it. It's going to be Random Thoughts. So we're just going to got a few objectives to talk about here that we've written down, and we're going to debate them a little bit back and forth and get some good discussions about that. Before we get into that, I wanted to mention some of the stuff I've been doing, which a plug for our friends over at the Beyond the Breakers podcast. I was on their show Sunday night and recorded a podcast for them with them about a sailing yacht that sank in a race where a whole bunch of other sailing yachts were affected and turned over, and people, I think 5 or 6 sailors died. And but anyway, Beyond the Breakers was a bit of a mentor for us, and they've helped us out. And just want to give a shout out to them. If you want to learn about shipwrecks and the things around, factors that surround them, that's a great podcast to listen to. Our friends down in Wisconsin, Tanner and Taylor, do a good job, and they've had us on now twice as guest hosts, and they plug our podcast all the time. So appreciate that. That's something I was doing, writing a script and participating with them. In the meantime, I'm still reading that Krupp book about the Krupp Corporation in Germany. I think I'm almost done. I've just finished the Second World War, and we're into the start of the Cold War part, and how Krupp how that was handled. So I'm learning about that and getting ready for spring, planning a few camping trips, stuff like that. That's about it.
It's good you mentioned the Beyond the Breakers guys, because I always just assume that everybody listening to our podcast is a firefighter, right? Like they know the basic minimum of what we're doing and all that, but it's good to have the reminder once in a while that there is just some people that have never touched a fire hose in their life that listen and think we know what we're talking about. They don't know any better.
That's right. They mentioned that actually on Sunday when we were recording, going, it's just so they enjoy the in-depth perspectives that we discuss once we get into an incident. They like that, and they also like the conflict. I said, well, we try to keep it to a dull roar when we're on the podcast. It's much louder when we're.
There's no conflict. Come on.
Conflicts? No.
Seems like there's more conflict when it's one that I'm here for, which is, I don't know why, but
yeah, we're not sure either.
I listened to you guys do Cologne, and you just agreed on everything, and it was all just like a walk on the beach. But I almost fell asleep. There was nothing to keep me interested.
Well, Cologne was really it was right along the lines of what we've been doing. Like you look at the Irish reports, right? And it's all the same: communication, SCBA, and air accountability. Like all this stuff just came together in just different country, different fire trucks, and funny helmets.
Yep. The common factors. We're going to do a tailboard about that. Because we keep seeing a lot of the same things over and over again. I bring them up in my incident command training with people going, accountability, communications, the same thing, size up or lack thereof. And we see those in the over and over. But yeah, you're right. So tell me, Doug, why does a town of 1,000 people that does maybe 200 calls a year need a custom chassis that costs $100,000 more than a commercial chassis or more?
Well, see, when you put it that way, when that's your lead into the question, when you go, why does a town of 1,000 people? Well, then I basically agree with you that a town of 1,000 people probably doesn't need a custom cab engine or whatever. But you often blanket term it that like a big city doesn't need one either, that's where I disagree. But I mean, I can't speak for them. I know nothing about them other than I saw the truck parked there, but I'm sure they do some kind of auto aid or mutual aid with the rest of the county, and they might get more calls than we think they get. And I mean, maybe they got a good deal because they bought one for every hall in the county. I don't know. But
yeah, but we've been talking about retaining volunteers. If you buy something like that, if you would have seen it, like the decals, they have a station pride thing on the back, and that was the first thing. It's like, hey, Dirk, check out the rear. So I walk around, they got this nice station pride thing on there, and that's how you retain. I mean, that might be $100,000 well invested to attract volunteers and keep them.
Yeah, unfortunately, you trigger me into a memory. Guy I used to work for, he delivered a aerial platform to the city of Lloydminster back in 1987, I think. 100-foot T-bow aerial platform on a Spartan.
that was a good year.
Yep. Yeah, and this sales owner of the company I used to work for selling equipment, Howard Bradley, he was up in the mayor with the mayor or something, showing him the new piece of equipment, and I guess the mayor kind of turned to him and said, "I suppose you think I'm kind of crazy letting our fire chief buy this big fancy truck." The late great Ted Gustafson, who passed away years ago, was the fire chief of the day. But anyway, but and of course Howard's not going to say anything because he's leaving with a check for however much it was back in 1987, $500,000 or something. And so, he's not going to say anything, and the mayor says, that's okay. He says, I know that it's probably a little more than we need for Lloydminster, a town of 10,000 people at the time, maybe. I didn't research that, but I'm guessing. But he says exactly what you just said. He says, I give the guys the stuff they want because I need to retain them. They do good service, and if this makes them come to calls, then it's worth it, right? So there definitely is a point to that. Although I would simply rather spend the money on the fire package, the firefighting part, than the chassis and cab. If I'm going to waste an extra $100,000, I would spend it on because the chassis and cab drives the same. The seating's slightly different, but I mean it gets there just as fast.
Well, I mean, it doesn't always drive the same.
They're very similar. They're very comparable. So that's where I always get on that thing about commercial chassis. Do you really need it? Actually, some of the big cities in the States, I think it was might have been Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's a few cities that always bought commercial for a long, long time. I don't know if they still do, but for years they kind of leaned on the commercial chassis thing. And it's an only North American phenomenon. What's different? You don't see it anywhere else in the world, these custom fire truck chassis. Everywhere else it's on a commercial chassis. So, how do we justify that, especially if it's significantly more money?
I got one argument that is always used against me when I'm talking about European helmets. They are ugly, right? Those those off the shelf kind of, it's ugly. Cap over is the way to go. That looks like a fire truck. Nice chrome on it and all everything. So yeah, I'm with Doug. Like,
You can put chrome on anything. I mean, it's just chrome. You shouldn't put you shouldn't put it on the wheel nuts anyway, because you have to have the indicator nuts to make sure your wheels are tight.
I put it on my European helmet. How's that?
How come the picture on the wall behind you isn't a commercial truck?
Because it's an aerial and it needs a different frame and a lot of stuff you can't get on a commercial truck. That would be hard to build that truck on a commercial truck.
Talk about Toronto. That's a commercial truck chassis.
Yes, it is. No pump. Yeah, which helps a lot. Yeah, no pump.
No pump. That's the way it should be.
Well, that's a preference based on, I think, the no pump thing based on the community. If you're in a small city like Lacombe or where you've got the one aerial device and you don't have a lot of pumps or engines, then it probably makes sense to put a pump and tank on the aerial. Have a quint, if you will, a full quint. But in a bigger city, it's most likely a waste to have a pump and tank because you've got tons of pumps. Anytime you've got a big rockin' fire, you're going to have a lot of pumps there or engines there. So why put a pump and tank on the aerial, make it more complex and lose compartment space, etc.? So I don't argue with you there. Calgary just changed, right?
It is nice to have a pump on the ladder when you have those big incidents like the industrial stuff, because then you're tying up a pump to pump to the ladder.
But it's sitting there doing nothing anyway. The pump.
That it's true, but that requires a little bit more organization on the incident commander part. Getting it all lined up, reverse laying, and all the water supply stuff. So I'm not sure. I could lose the tank because most tanks on aerials or ladders are
300 gallons.
300 gallons. So you charge the standpipe and half of it is gone.
Well, no, you're not using it. That the idea of the tank isn't for the ladder pipe. The idea of the tank is for the car fire that they send the ladder to.
1,200 is still not enough for a car fire.
Well, not anymore because the cars are so flammable, whether they're EV or gas. So much high intensity plastic and stuff in there that the cars are taking a lot more water to extinguish. Okay, I still like commercial chassis.
I think, I guess now we've segued from cabs into Quints, but I think there's a place for Quint in the North American Fire Service.
Oh
But I
yeah,
think it's used improperly a lot in the sense that it's it's sold to administrators and whoever like this truck can do both jobs. But in reality, that truck shows up at the call and has to do one or the other job. It because they don't put enough people on it to split the crew and do both. Where if it shows up as an engine, it can't also be the ladder because everyone's doing engines. You know what I mean? Where, and
yeah.
I agree
So
with you, Paul. I mean, this is too many times in one day where I've said that,
write this down.
but I do think that based on the size of your department, like the New York's, the Chicago's, the Los Angeles, Toronto, I mean, anyone that's got 15, 20, 30 or more fire stations or whatever has 15 or 20 or 30 or more engines or pumps. You don't need 10 or 15 more on a ladder because most of the time you're sending 3 pumps to the initial first alarm anyways. You're going to use them as an engine and not use your ladder. So you're putting way more wear and tear on your truck than you need to carrying the weight around and all. And like, it's another thing for maintenance that you got to pump test every year. And I just think and I'm a huge proponent of engines do engine work, ladders do truck work. So you don't need to confuse everybody on what you're doing. Now, there's been tests and whatever on like the St. Louis total quint concept, and they would tell you it worked or didn't work or whatever, but they kind of have a hybrid of the total quint concept now.
The objective there was to put aerial devices on all pumps, not to make all aerials quints. It's a different here. We're talking 55-foot or 65-foot booms or ladders and stuff like that. We're just adding an aerial to the pumps. We're not making all aerials pumpers. And so they had regular sized tanks like 400 or 500 gallons, and they were really a pumper with a waterway on it or a roof access device on it, if you will. The one I want to comment is I was involved in the Regina deal where they bought I don't know 6 pumps and three quints from Rosenbauer when I was selling with them, and their idea was they wanted, and I kind of said, well, you're going to a smaller ladder, like a 75 isn't a lot of ladder for a city. They have though a couple of 100-foot ladders anyway, but the reason they bought quints on the 75, so they bought pumps or engines, and in halls where there's only 2 trucks and they have an engine or a pump, they bought a ladder they bought a quint so that it could be second out. If the first truck's on a medical, if the first truck's on another fire call that's a single alarm response, like a car fire or something, or garbage can, they have another unit in the station, in the zone, in the area that can do another car fire, another initial attack in a house fire, that kind of stuff until the further away units come. So that kind of made sense to me. And they didn't buy the biggest, baddest thing, so it's not heavy to drive around. They bought, I think they're tandems, but they bought 75-foot, fairly short quints to fill that need. So that kind of made sense. But for a big metropolitan city like Vancouver or Calgary or Winnipeg or something to say every aerial is going to be a quint, you kind of wonder.
Well, I think we all basically agree on that.
We killed that one.
So much for the conflict on that one.
Again, what the hell's going on here? Oh, I got one. I throw one in here. Doug. You were talking about the Cologne podcast there that we've done last time around, and we were mentioning fire-based EMS, and Paul was saying that like it should be.
Well, yeah, I was listening, and I mean,
I heard a big groan there.
there's been a few episodes that I wasn't able to join for the recording, and when I listen to you guys, I always want to chime in on something, but you guys take advantage of me not being there to throw in your tidbits. But I mean, you just mentioned Cologne had fire-based EMS, and Paul just quipped like the way it should be, and my reaction or what I don't 100% think that isn't the way it should be, but I think there's a better or worse way of doing fire-based EMS. So my first question to Paul was like, well, why do you think that is the way it should be? And maybe we should explain to the non-firefighter listeners the difference between fire-based EMS, what we mean, and not fire-based EMS.
And we probably should have done that for Quints and all that kind of stuff too. But anyway, that's okay. Yeah, no, and it may be because of it's what I was brought up with watching on TV, aka emergency. But I really think and I worked ambulance for 6 years, and then I worked, fire once part time for many years, and then full time for 10 years. But I think that because for one, there has to be fire stations for coverage. So the fire station is going to get called anyway. If you're doing proper, EMS or proper care for your citizens, you're going to have firefighters doing medical first response. Since they're going anyway, why aren't they providing the treatment and let someone else do the transport is what I'm saying. I'm saying EMS should be fire-based anyway. They've got to be in the stations. They're in all the areas. It's the quickest way. The people have the equipment already. All that's needed is the extra training of the paramedics that are on the fire trucks, whether they're regular paramedics or advanced care paramedics. And then have somebody else do the transport is kind of how I think it should be.
Between the actual treatment and the transport.
Right.
See, in Germany, all the Korea fire departments do the ambulance service, including the transport. They staff ambulances.
Which is common in many cities in the States, right? Chicago, New York.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know. What other cities, Doug?
Well,
Boston,
not New York.
No.
Not New York's not
New York EMS. They're merged.
They're the same department, but they're two different branches of the same department. But we'll get back to that. As far as what you're saying, I think Los Angeles does it that way. Lots of the Southwest, Phoenix, I think, and in Texas, I know of Houston does it that way. And it's an Alberta thing too, right? All the small, well, not all, but Lethbridge, Red Deer, Sherwood Park, St. Albert, Airdrie used to. They all kind of have.
Canmore used to.
We always call it integrated fire service, right? Where the ambulance is basically just another fire truck, and you spend
Wood Buffalo
from there, and it is what it is.
Correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you know better, but Winnipeg has a system that's kind of like what Paul was mentioning. They have a fully trained paramedic on the fire truck. So there's a fire medic, but they're riding on the fire truck, going basically first responder, but basically as an ALS ambulance, not ambulance, as an ALS fire truck, and then they would meet. I think they have not sure if it's a city EMS system or a private, and they would transport the patient, and then the paramedic decides if he's going to go with the patient or not. And I think those guys are actually extra on the rig. So if they're riding 4 on the regular fire truck, that paramedic would be the 5th guy on there. At least that's how I understood it.
Yeah, I can't speak to Winnipeg because I know they tried to, if not did, completely merge for a little while and became the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service or something. And then I think they had they've gone back the other way a little bit now, but they still have medics. So you could be right. I don't know. I don't know. I'd be guessing if I said anything more than that. But so here's my perspective on things that I've talked to Dirk about this before, and it's what I thought of when Paul brought it or mentioned it the other day. But I think I agree that fire-based EMS is better for the patient. Now, I don't believe in that means that you have to cross-train every single staff member, because the service I work for is a first response service, doesn't do ambulance transport. The EMS is provided by the province, like most of the rest of the province, and part of why I think that way is I go to calls with lots of really good paramedics that would never, ever be able to become a firefighter. They wouldn't pass the physical. They wouldn't whatever, but they're really good paramedics. I think there's some people in the fire department, holding my hand up, me included, that probably would not be a very good paramedic. So I think if you made everybody be both, you're going to exclude a lot of people that are really good at one or the other that can't do both. And then another part of that is the training. There's tons of ongoing training. Like on our fire department, we complain that we can't get all the training we want to get done. And we don't even have we have a little bit of medical training, but not what a paramedic or advanced care paramedic would have. And I'm sure they have lots of training without all doing the rescue stuff and the hazmat stuff and whatever. But I don't think it'd be a bad thing to have them in the fire hall with us. We know them. It probably, I can't speak for the rest of Canada, but I think if Alberta, we switch to my idea, it'd be a way better work environment for the EMS personnel. And so I agree with fire-based EMS. I don't agree with completely integrated EMS. I think if somebody is or wants to be cross-trained and do both, then they can. But I just don't think forcing everybody that's hired or going to train everybody now to do both is the best service. And then,
well, I think
to what Paul said about having a paramedic on the fire truck but not on the ambulance and the EMS transports. So what happens if it's a serious enough call that they need paramedic to transport with them? Now you're tying up that fire truck all the time to do the transport. I don't know how it works in those jurisdictions, but I know in our jurisdiction, you're not allowed to give up patient care to somebody less trained than you.
Yeah, the ambulances have to have the same training, or like you say, that guy's going with the medic unit. Now, many places will run the medic in another unit.
Sure.
Car or a pickup or SUV or
just like we have PRUs here too. Yeah, but like I know in like the Phoenix area, the engines are all ALS engines, and I think there's a private company, AMR, whoever, that does the ground ambulance part of it. So are the ground ambulance people advanced care paramedics also?
Most likely.
Are they just paramedics that if they need advanced care, the fire goes with them? I don't know. But
I'm not sure.
I think, Doug, I totally agree. Like the situation we have right now, it would be really hard to cross-train everybody. It would be really a process over decades. Again, back to Germany, where that's been the case since the 60s or 70s when EMS actually really took off. And so they hire firefighter paramedics and they train them really well. But that's always been like that. Having a transition, I think you're right that it would be hard to make a good firefighter also a good paramedic and vice versa. That might be hard. That'd be a hiring over time. Just hire EMTs, paramedics, or train them yourself, right? Which is also a thing. I mean, a paramedic costs a shit ton of money to get, right? And then you're stuck on that ambulance. So I personally wouldn't want that job in Alberta, to be honest, with all the waiting times and all the red alerts and all this stuff. So, but it's an essential service. So, and we are essential service. Combining those two.
But we're seeing the results of that in that the fire department's picking up the pieces anyway. The fire department's Airdrie, Calgary, they've all transported people because there's no medics. Grand Prairie, High Level bought an ambulance and it's in service as an ambulance to transport. Was it the
No,
county?
not to transport, to treat. That was
no, they can transport too. They have to get medical director approval to transport.
The reason they got it is they can treat a patient, because then you cannot put that. If they would have sent a rescue truck out, you cannot put a patient in -30 in a rescue truck, but you can in an ambulance. So it was not designed to transport.
They have medical direction approval. They have to call in to say, hey, there's no ambulances for this long. We want to transport. And it's the same down it's not Wheatland County. What's the county south of Calgary? Foothills, the next one. They have 3 transport ambulances that were taken away during the AHS takeover, and now they bought 3 new ambulances and they have permission to transport. And so it's already happening. The fire department's picking up the pieces. In Edmonton, who transported the police officers 3 days ago? The police did.
Well, the police, yeah, it doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what color the ambulance was. The police were going to transport those people. That's a. They're not going to sit there and wait for any ambulance to show up. Like that's a.
So the fire department's picking up the pieces anyway. So the fire department should be engaged in the conversation. We have 7 departments that are integrated in Alberta right now. Okay, and there's 3 that are no longer.
When I said that if they were fire based as opposed to how we have it now, but not integrated, and I said it'd be a better working environment for them. I think personally, could be wrong, but my personal opinion is if EMS was all fire-based, part of a fire department in Alberta, and had the IAFF machine behind it, they'd have more success getting more ambulances on the road and not depending on the engine or the volunteer fire department as much. I could be wrong, but
yeah, no one's got the solution. I don't think. I mean, it's all just speculation.
Yeah, I think giving ambulances to volunteer firefighters is a dangerous game because they're lacking the training. They do, even though they do a good job, but then you maybe even triple the call volume. So now you're away from your job all the time and you're exposed to, you're working in your community. Now you get called to grandma's heart attack and all this stuff. The mental toll on the volunteers would be enormous. Not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying in the long run, it would be very detrimental to their mental health. And to retain people.
How many volunteers you have and what the staffing models are. If you go to the northeastern United States, volunteer firefighters, medics, whatever, they volunteer their time to go stay in the station and respond like full-time staff. And they have way more members per population than we're used to because they don't respond from home. They go work their shift twice a month or 3 times a month or whatever in the station. So it's a totally different.
Well, we talked about that like a live-in kind of, but then that's for me in that sense. That's not volunteer. That's
sure it is. They're not getting paid. They're not getting paid.
That's my side job or something like that, right?
They get T-shirts and hats and beer.
I think like for some reason I don't know if it's like those positions you speak of, Paul, in the eastern states or whatever are like very close to very metropolitan areas and there's more people anyways. But I don't see like in Lacombe there where we both were, if you wanted to have a crew of 4 in that fire hall all the time on a volunteer basis, you need like 3 times more people. And where are these 3 times more people going to come from? Right? Like,
yep. Yeah, and that's the problem everywhere. You're right.
That's a population. That's a population density, but it's also a social problem because, as far as I understand, in the States, there's still this community thinking. Volunteering is more prevalent, and we just don't have the people. And especially Alberta with the oil field, you're away from home for 2 weeks. It would be super hard to do this.
Like, I'd be interested to see in Montana, where there isn't the population density of like East Coast, Long Island, New York. How do they have live-in programs and all that kind of stuff? Like,
yeah,
I have no idea.
Some do. You get the odd one here and there that the fire department is exceptionally progressive and able to do unique stuff. There's a few, but on the general, no, it's a struggle like everywhere else. Now we're evolving into that episode we did a couple of months ago about the volunteer thing and everything.
Okay, well, let's move on. I had another topic that popped into my head one day. I know Paul's opinion on it, I'm pretty sure, so I figured we'd bring it up and it'd be a good discussion. And because I'm guessing the blue card answer is a certain thing, but what do you guys think?
He said blue card before you.
Yeah, I said blue card before Paul. There's the drinking game.
See? It's awesome. It's getting better all along here.
So what do you guys think about using 10 codes on the radio instead of just talking with plain language?
Crickets.
Can't do it. It's not ICS compliant.
Why?
It would technically in Alberta be somewhat against the Local Authorities Emergency Management Act, which
Why?
decrees that you must use ICS for your management of emergencies.
But the police use 10 codes.
Technically, it's against ICS training.
Is the ICS designed to have a common language? And if we agree on the 10 codes are our common language,
But there's no 10 codes in ICS. There's certain terminology in ICS that is common, logistics section and base and camp and incident command post and heli spot and heli base. But there's no 10 codes. And they say if it regards to, hey, I'm going for lunch, or we're off duty because we have to get a flat tire fixed, or we're going to go get the groceries, or we're around the back, or we have an emergency, then those should all be in plain language. So, and the problem is when you get two agencies, when we respond together with another mutual aid agency, if we're doing 10 codes, they might not be the same 10 codes.
Sure, that's
the
I guess
reason.
in my life that doesn't happen very often, so that's not something I really considered. But I want to know. I don't want to know what ICS Paul thinks. I want to know what. Take your ICS badge off, and just what does Paul think? The guy that's been in the fire service for 500 years.
I think that 10 codes are another pitfall to automatic aid or mutual aid. So if you look at a significant fire on the outskirts of your city, or let's say we always talk about that Cochrane where the hotel burned and Rocky View was there and Cochrane was there and Redwood Meadows was there and Calgary was there. If you're using different 10 codes, how do you communicate?
Yeah, there's got a point there.
That's why
my thinking or whatever. I mean, like we've established, I'm a big nerd of the FDNY who uses exclusively uses 10 codes. And something that I like about it is you can say a whole lot by saying very little on the radio and not tying up the radio. And you don't have to explain everything. You just say this, and it's like everybody knows what you mean right now. And that's
as long as the receiving party repeats the 10 code back.
And well, they don't, but in New York, it's all 1-8. They never have mutual aid, right? It's not a problem there. It's New York is New York.
Hurricane Sandy, World Trade Center 1 and 2 never have mutual aid.
The World Trade Center. You're talking about one event that happened one time.
No, twice. There was one before where there was an explosion in the parkade.
And they didn't call mutual aid.
Mutual aid. Maybe not.
And
Hurricane Sandy.
The only official mutual aid they called on 9/11 was for a mask service unit from Jersey City.
Everybody else just went.
Taking Paul's.
I can't 100% guarantee, but I'm pretty confidently saying that if New York's calling mutual aid, they're not talking on the same radios anyways. They have to do face-to-face and whatever. But for the 99.99999% of time in New York, where it's just New York talking to New York, my whole point is the 10 codes works because, I mean, you got a whole borough of 2 million people and you're dealing with emergencies. You can't. That's what I hate about Blue Card is you want me to say, hey, Paul, the sky's blue. And then for you to answer me, you have to say, hey, the sky's blue, and then say your thing. And then it's all this repeating back and forth. And to me, it just ties up a lot of radio time, and it doesn't need to. And I'm just bringing this topic up to talk about it for the podcast, to be honest. I think talking normally works too. But I know in some agencies where you respond to an alarm ringing call, and you got a whole first alarm going, and then they figure out the first 2 units arrive and it's just cooking, and they got to get on the radio and say like, "Hey, everybody responding to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Main Street. This is just cooking. You can all return to service." That's a pretty big chunk of radio time. Where in New York, all you got to say is 10:18, and everybody goes home. So it keeps things to a minimum as far as tying up a radio, is my whole point.
So my question would be, taking Paul's argument against it by not having everybody on the same, is New York, Long Island, Jersey, are they all using the 10 codes? Is that very common in that area, or is it really just New York? Do you know that?
Well, I don't know about, I know New York City has their set of 10 codes, and Yonkers, which borders them, uses 10 codes, but it's a completely different set of 10 codes. It's just like, like the Edmonton City Police, the Calgary City Police, and the RCMP all have their own 10 codes. So, like, I mean, Paul has a point.
Be kind of like Blue Card that you can adjust for your department and change the
No,
language. What? You said that. You can take Blue Card and plug it into the rural department, the big city department.
you can take it anywhere, but the language is the same, except you don't. I mean, you can take it anywhere, but the language is basically the same. You just don't have boxes, because you may not have box alarms pre-planned and stuff like that. But it is adaptable to some point. But in order to make it universal for interagency operations, that's where 10 codes come apart. Otherwise than that, it works fine. It's the thing is if you're doing interagency operations, not even just the fire. So the fire, you're doing a hazmat call. You get a big hazmat call tomorrow, and you're using contractors, and you're using city public works, roads, waterworks, etc. None of those guys know what your 10 codes are.
Yeah,
So
but
if you're in a,
those guys aren't on your radio system anyways.
sure they are. They
No,
are now. Yes, they are. Maybe not in your city, but your city next door, the county next door is. The buses, public works, everybody's on it. On the
You're
same
telling
radio.
me in the county next door to where I am, that
Yep.
regularly, if ever, the bus drivers and the fire chiefs are talking to each other on the radio?
They have the same radio system. If you had a mass casualty, like an apartment building, the fire in, there you go. There's your 10 codes. The fire nearby last winter, the nursing home, where they had let's see, the local department, the neighboring metropolitan department, the neighboring little city department, the neighboring county department, the other neighboring county department, all came to that call, along with
Not,
buses and Red Cross
And they
and
didn't talk on
everybody
the
else.
radio. The bus driver doesn't talk on the radio.
Command did. He's talking to his commander.
and not all of them use Blue Card, Paul. Not all of them use Blue Card.
No, but they're using ICS.
And your electrical and your gas company does not know Blue Card.
No, but
Like,
they know
they're not
ICS.
going to book on scene level 1 or on deck. So, I mean, I'm not defending 10 codes or anything, but the outside agencies don't know our system unless you taught them ICS. But in ICS, they don't talk about tactical stuff or strategical stuff. It's just organizational stuff.
All right, well, good talk.
That's great talk. We started so quietly, and then we got loud.
I know. It's going to be hell to edit.
Yeah, you just got to dial down on the volume. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for participating in our Random Thoughts Tailboard Talk. Give us your feedback. What do you think? You agree? You disagree? Tell us what you think, and we'd love to have the feedback and hope you enjoy this bonus episode, as I call them.
Tell us if you like 10 codes or Blue Card.
You can follow us on Twitter at Podcast Traffic, our Facebook page, Emergency Traffic Podcast, and you can email us at the podcast, Emergency Traffic Podcast at Gmail.
Stay safe, everybody.
See you at the big one.